So this session is what we titled Understanding Bezls. Earlier in our opening remarks and in coming up with this conference, our goal was to create this as a very exciting, engaging conference. This will be the least of both of those, but so I'm going to apologize in advance for that. But it's going to lay the foundation, the framework for everything else you're going to hear. So one of the goals that we're going to have is that we keep kind of reinforcing topics. So, we're going to bring up concepts and terminology and technology, and we're going to continue reinforcing those through each of the subsequent sessions. And the getting started point is going to be to, like I said, explain that the terminology that we use, because it's, we've been working with it for a year and a half. We're very well aware of the terminology, and sometimes during these sessions you'll hear us say something like, oh, you're just adding a new view to that panel and you're going to go select a bezel. And to us that makes complete sense, but if you don't understand the terminology behind it, you're going to get lost in the session. So just as a forewarning on that, and that's also why we picked this as a 10:30 session, so all of you are hopefully caffeinated, because it's an hour and a half long. I'm going to try to keep it interesting and show you some fun and kind of cool things as we go through here. So I'm going to start off with a quote that says, if I'm going to tell a real story, I'm going to start with my name. There's a quote by Kendrick Lamar. And so, as I mentioned earlier, my name is Brian Ellis. I'm a sales manager with SaberLogic. I am Adam's brother, and so we have always been very close, and we were fortunate to start a company together. And SaberLogic, we started in 2002. We started out as a manufacturing company, and our focus had always been to bring technology into manufacturing. We would go into these facilities. The facility we even came out of, the technology they had was like 7 to 10 years behind what consumer technology is. And it's still oftentimes the case, but what we recognized then and what we continue to recognize is that technology is a competitive advantage for manufacturing, distribution companies, anything like that. By being able to utilize technology, you can make yourself more competitive in a field. So our goal was to understand that technology and be able to bring it to everybody as best we can. So I was growing up nerdy. Both Adam and myself, neither of us went to college specifically with a technology track or anything like that. We just grew up in it. Our aunt, she actually worked for Volvo and was an IT manager for the plant in Orville that still existed, and went on to go work for Dell and all this other kind of stuff. So, we kind of got raised in that environment. Our first computer was an Apple IIe. We used that to play a lemonade stand and various other games for a long time, and, used the very early versions of their Word, text editor on there that once you would go through and double space it, literally it just added an extra space so that if you modified your document, it would put it on to the next, you added words into it, it would screw up all the formatting. So we've been in technology for a very long time. So by the time it came through to college, both Adam and myself went through a management track at the University of Akron and kind of picked up our business side to kind of complement the technology side that we're already into. So I'm a programmer by trade, and you'll probably find as you've worked with me, I fit more of that kind of engineer model than I would a salesperson. For instance, I'm terrible with names, which is probably the worst thing you can have as a salesperson. But, you ask us, how did I become a sales manager? Well, it's mostly just drawing the short end of that stick. We needed some salespeople, and so I kind of jumped into that role and went from there. The SaberLogic, like I kind of talked about, we started in 2002. It's actually two pairs of brothers, so me and Adam are owners, and there's another set of owners, Eli and Seth, that are also brothers. And we started out at a company called Remington Products out of Wadsworth, which is why we're still in Wadsworth. If anybody wondered why we picked the illustrious tech capital of Wadsworth to start an office into. But we started with them writing certification software to help them with their ISO certification, and we kind of continued forward with there, turned into a consulting practice, and we kept getting the same requests over and over and over again. So I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit on here, but as a consulting company, we grew up to have about 25 people in total, and we worked with companies all across the globe. We kept seeing the same requests. How do I make my, what do I do with the cloud? Like, that was the first one that really came through. You know, eWeek and all those other publications started talking about the cloud and how it's going to change things. And a lot of customers come to us and say, I want the cloud. And we're like, well, what do you want to do with the cloud? I don't know, but like, we know that we need it. You know, but the biggest thing was that the relationship of data and employees to the company has changed. It has continued to evolve past your traditional workday, you know, where people do need to be able to access their data from other places. And what we saw is, you know, everybody else was just using VPN, so, you know, pull the laptop out and VPN in and run all these applications to get the data that they need. And it was time consuming. It wasn't a good solution to the problem. You know, so it got into where we're building all these portals and all these, like, you know, custom ways of customers being able to access the data. But what we found out is that, you know, I mean, those projects are expensive. You know, typical web portal is probably about $30,000 usually, you know, if we were quoting it out or something along those lines. You know, and for a lot of companies, especially the companies in our market, we serve a lot of like small to mid-sized companies, is that wasn't really, you know, in their budget. Or if it was, they're blowing a lot of their IT budget into one big project that's going to cause lean time through the rest of the year. But at the same time, you know, we don't think that only big companies should be able to solve these problems. You know, the big companies should be able to use the data the same as, or you know, small companies should be able to use the same data as big companies, same technology, and really be able to leverage this technological revolution. I imagine with all of you guys being, you know, technical in nature, you are aware of the speed of innovation is speeding up. You know, it was here. We're kind of on this exponential rise right now. And you're watching this new technology, this new evolution of technology, like machine learning come out, and it's changing the world. You know, and it's not yet, you know, but again, this is another eWeek thing. Everybody talks to and says, I want machine learning. And we're like, all right, well, do you know what it is? Like, no, but, you know, beside the point. You know, so we're helping companies understand that. You know, we're helping companies be able to use that. And what Bezlio represented for us was a way that we could take this technology and bring it from the publication and bring it to people, bring it to users in a way that was easy, and in a way that kind of levels that playing field between big companies and small to mid-sized companies to kind of narrow that technology gap. So I'm an architect. Adam and myself, like, we had this idea for a while, and we'd actually pitched it to some investors and all these other people to kind of talk about the idea of what we were going to do. You know, and because it was a passion project for us, we kind of saw this and we said, you know, this is going to be the future. We created a proof of concept to show that we could accomplish this, the ability to take all of your on-prem data and make it available to users through the cloud. So we saw that this was possible and we started looking at it. And one of the investors, thankfully, kind of came up to us and said, all right, well, you know, you guys are a company and you already have some working capital, like, why don't you build it? And so that's what we did. Adam and myself kind of worked on it, continued to evolve it, continued to change it. You know, and that's one of the cool things that you get to see about that as well is that, you know, is that it's constantly evolving, that it's constantly changing, that it's constantly growing. So we put it out there, and now we get all these users, and the users are coming back to us and saying, this is cool, can it do this, can it do this, can it do this? And they're helping us expand the platform, and they're helping us take all of this and, you know, grow it into like new technology. And it's also, and I'm going to talk about this later, but it's a collaboration tool that can build community around it as well. So everybody in here, you know, all of our apps and plugins are hosted on GitHub, and we've had contributions on GitHub, making the apps better for other users, so users can share content. We've got partners. You know, BizTech was one of our first like resellers, and have been very actively involved in it, and also, you know, again, helping us push this framework and say, well, what about this, and what about that, so that we continue to evolve it, and then being able to build a whole ecosystem for our partners to be able to exist around here as well, and build new companies and build new technology around it, just kind of leveraging the framework that we've put in place. The other part is I'm one of the owners of Life, which I already talked to you about. So an overview of what I'm going to be covering here, I'm going to kind of roll through my slides a little bit more. I'll be bouncing back and forth between some demo and some slides, but in general the flow is going to be a background, which, you know, kind of background on which you've heard a lot about on Bezlio already, terminology. So that way when I say things like, a panel and a view and all this kind of stuff, we all know what we're talking about, so we have a consistent language that we're speaking. We're going to talk about technology. So we're going to be talking about the foundation of what makes Bezlio what it is. And one of the things that we're hoping to accomplish with these 2 days is to be able to take your vision of what Bezlio is right now, and everybody probably has a different vision of what Bezlio is and what it means to them, and expand that to include what other people are doing inside of Bezlio. Expand that out and say, no, this is what the foundation is. So expand that understanding to be able to take it and be able to look a lot further in terms of how it can help. The community, so that's part of what I'm going to be talking about is why we did GitHub, why we wanted our users to be able to collaborate on these things, why we're using Slack, why we're trying to make our engineers available to users to be able to ask questions and stuff like that. Where we're going and growing. So again, that'll be kind of forward-looking and talking about some of the other things we're doing there. And I'm going to circle back around on some depth. So we left a little bit of flexibility in our schedule here because, one is that we don't want to get anything lost through here. As I did this presentation, because we've got a mixed crew, I'm going to start at a high level as I go through technology and terminology, and then I'm going to slowly try to dial it down into even more kind of technical terms and a technical understanding. As I go through here, if you get lost, you don't have to worry about the fact that you don't understand what reflection is. That's not important to the overall story unless you're a technical person, and then it becomes relevant and becomes interesting and will help you kind of work on these future topics. So background, why did we build this to begin with? So, like I mentioned before, it was this idea of being able to take this technology and, being able to open it and make it, available to anybody. By making it SaaS, we were able to take it and say, you know what, you can try it for free. You don't have to look and produce a capital budget to try to figure out how this fits in here and go through a long sales cycle. You know what, just download it, try it out, see if it works for you. Now that was difficult in the early days when we didn't have a lot of templates and the apps were a lot more complex. But as we continue to grow this platform forward and as this platform continues to evolve and becomes easier for users to take on, then it's going to be easier and easier for people to kind of get into it. And then now that we have the communication capabilities already done, that's the biggest part to most projects that we've ever done. I talk about those portals and stuff like that. Figuring out how you communicate to your ERP, how you get that data, if you're syncing and all these kind of things, that usually is one of the most costliest elements of any project that you're going to do. So by being able to standardize on that, we can, drastically reduce the cost of developing solutions using Bezlio. Then what that allows us to do is, we're constantly keeping our fingers on the pulse of technology. We're watching where things are going, and we're helping to evolve that. So, we went to that manufacturing trade show up in Cleveland a couple weeks back, and we talked to the guys from Intel, and they're working on some augmented reality devices, like the heads-up displays and stuff like that. So what we're doing is we're watching this technology, and we're saying, all right, well, as these things are coming out, does it seem relevant? Does it seem interesting? And is it something that we can apply to our framework to bring that really advanced technology to our users sooner than they would otherwise? The thing about, a lot of these things is because we have a background in manufacturing is that we understand, in business in general, I'm going to keep using manufacturing, but I apologize, I know distribution says the exact same way. But, because we have this background, we have an understanding of what works and what doesn't work. Most of the ERP systems that you guys have used, I would bet a lot of you look at it and be like, boy, this was written by a programmer because, it's like 30,000 fields on a screen that aren't relevant to most people, and there's no, you can't really manage by exception. You can't, there's no predictive analytics into it. And then if you do get an analytics package, it's like, here's a trend line of sales over 3 years. And I look like, all right, but I want to know, did this shipment go on time? Things like that is that a lot of times, it's not really 100% relevant. So we can bring, we can evaluate these technologies, evaluate them for relevancy, and then be able to bring it forward. With Randall Bearings, one of our customers, I did a presentation for them or a proof of concept where, we switched, instead of using barcode scanners, we used the camera on the phone, and we could scan multiple barcodes simultaneously. So if I had a pallet worth of boxes, I could take a picture of it, and it would scan all of the barcodes at once and use all of them. But what we found after playing around with it is like, well, the camera speed is a little bit too slow on these devices still in terms of its focus gathering. So because of that, it wasn't really ripe yet. Something we're keeping an eye on, something we already have in our back pocket to say, yeah, that's going to be, something we're going to be looking at in the future. But our understanding of the business and also working with customers like you guys, like, yourselves in this room, really helps shape our vision of the applicability of this technology as we go through. So the history of Saber Logic, which everyone's already heard, and you already heard it for the second time. Everybody at the office jokes around because anytime I do a conference call, I put Saber Logic started in 2002 out of a manufacturing company, and the four brothers, blah, blah, blah. Like that same pitch is like always given, and what you realize as a salesperson is you're always saying the same thing over and over again. So all of you have probably heard that story once or twice. When we used it, we needed it. So this is an important thing, I think about any company or about any endeavor that you take on, is that we were one of our first customers. So we had a time tracking system, which was Windows only ran from our network. We had a task management system, which was Windows only worked from our network. We had a billing system, which only worked in our network if you VPN'd in. That was web-based. We had an accounting package. We're using Epicor, which was Windows only worked in our network. And you can probably see a trend here is that we had all these applications that as a technology company that we were running to get the data that we needed. So if I'm meeting with a customer, I'm logging into Epicor to get their AR history and open invoices, and I'm logging into task management to see what tasks are out there. I'm logging into our billing system to view all this kind of stuff. So we had the same problem that our customers were having. So when we built Bezlio, the first thing we said is, I don't want to do this anymore. I want all of our applications to be mobile. I want to be able to access them from anywhere. I don't want to have to VPN in because I don't want to carry my laptop around. If anybody's seen my laptop, it's gigantic. So that was not an efficient way of doing it. So we switched, and the first thing that we did is we took all the applications we did and did them in Bezlio. We made Bezls for them, and that helped us kind of like form and the foundation, but it also helped us kind of realize where the value points really are. And then when we went to customers, we went to, the first thing that we did is we talked to customers. We worked with, I think, all of you, for the most part, before launching Bezlio. And we said, what do you guys need? Let's show you what this can do, and then get feedback from you to say, like, all right, well, we can also get it to do these things. So that's how we knew when we needed it. And that's also when we knew our customers needed it. So we started with ourselves, and then we started talking to people and saying, all right, are you struggling to come up with a mobile strategy? And everybody's like, yeah. I talked to one company that I can think of since I started trying to sell Bezlio to anybody, and even before that, and asked them, like, do your customers want to use mobile devices, tablets, and phones? No, our users are fine with VPNing in. Now, here's an IT manager, and he's wrong. But, like this is like this is becoming an expectation of users. And if you bring, everybody's like talking about like the millennial problem, which I hate, like all of this like categorization and stuff like that. But as you hire younger people in, they are going to have an expectation of the technology they're going to work on. Their entire lives, they have had this, which is 10 times more powerful than any computer that's on the shop floor in most cases, and to do these incredible, tasks and stuff like that. And then they come into the business where, businesses have way bigger budgets than any person has, and they're like, oh yeah, you have to run this Windows application, or in some cases like a DOS application. And they're like, all right, you've got to be kidding here. So again, that technology not only helps your company, it helps you acquire new talent. And more important, I think very, very important than this as well, is that if you go to your customer and you can show them, here is your active shipment, here's your active orders, here's your invoices. You can get all this information, and you can show them that you're technologically advanced, your salespeople have shown they're technologically advanced. That changes their perception of your company as, having your stuff together and being able to access this data from anywhere. So that's really when we know our customers need it. And then the last part, like I kind of mentioned, Adam and I have been kicking this idea around for quite a while, but we had to wait for the technology to catch up to the concept. So we already had this idea of what we wanted to do, but the technology wasn't there to enable it yet. So that's where we've been watching this technology, and we continue to watch this technology, and we're kind of crazy about it. But we saw these things, Adam mentioned Angular 2 beta. We saw that come out, and we're like, boy, this is important. This is going to change the way that the internet works, and we want to be a part of it. And yeah, we took our lumps as a part of that. I mean, it's a very tough technology to continue on and to get into. But in terms of being able to do that, what it enabled our users to do is, a lot of the foundation of what happened inside of Bezlio. This idea of Adam talked about like dynamic components and what that means. So each bezel is a dynamic component. What happens is it gets compiled anytime you're on the screen and automatically inserted into what they call the DOM, which is just a fancy way of imagining what a web page is. It gets inserted in there dynamically whenever you visit the page. The cool thing about this technology is that all of the bezels you've already written will work on a mobile device. So we use, and as a part of one of the goals of Angular 2, and as we talk about mobile and stuff like that, is that you don't have to write different code. Is that same code that can compile it and put it into a web page can compile it and put it into an iPhone application or an Android application or anything like that. So we can use those capabilities, but we wanted to make sure when we built the thing that we had the foundation and the framework that we're going to continue to grow onto. So the purpose of this particular presentation. Understanding terminology will help in future sessions. Again, we all have to speak the same language first, and then we can go through there. Understanding technology will help determine goodness of fit for applications. So this is an important thing, is that if you understand the technology, not just templates, not just apps, but digging further and further and further into it, it's going to spark new ideas. We go to these trade shows, we show people one bit of our demo, and all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, I can think of, X, Y, and Z. JS is a good example. We went in there, purely CRM, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, but could it do this? Could it do this? I think Mike had like 5 different ideas during the presentation. Yeah, and it's like each one is like, yep. Just continue to go through there. We'll be covering the same ground multiple times, so some of these terms and things you get tired of probably hearing, but that's too bad. At the end, there will be a Q&A for depth and a bit more of freeform. So again, we're trying to keep this a little bit more unstructured so that we can turn into a dialogue, and then I can take into depth in different areas as we kind of go through here. All right, so I have another quote in here. I make a mean cup of coffee if you give me the right ingredients. It's a quote by Ice Cube. So terminology on the front, Bezlio, where did that come from? We kind of mentioned it was largely the domain name availability, but we also kind of kept with this kind of watch theme, and you'll see we continue to use that as we keep going through here. A bezel being that metal rim around the face of a watch, and the bezel itself being kind of the components that are behind the watch, the gears and all that kind of stuff. There's another element to that we're going to have to talk about, because it's an element that we don't talk a lot about, but it's the difference between what a bezel is and what a view is. Now, these are our terminology, and originally we started developing this thing, and we're like, oh, we're going to change all of this later on. We're just temporarily calling these things these. And then we ended up just keeping the term. So as we go through here, I'll try to explain all of these different terms so that there's a better understanding there. So there's also panels, which allow for organization of bezels, or more importantly, and I'm going to catch myself on my own here, organization of views. So a bezel is the code that's behind it. It's the layout of the screen. It's the code and everything that's behind the scenes. A view is basically an instance of that bezel on a panel. So whenever I log into it, I've got views. Those views are running the bezel. The bezel can be multiple views, and the bezel can be shared between multiple people. And I'll kind of walk through some examples in here and kind of show you what I'm talking about as I go through here. But these are important concepts to get, because it's it kind of provides the foundation for a lot of other pieces. In a view, so I keep jumping ahead. There's a difference between a bezel and a view. You share a bezel, which is the code. You don't necessarily share a view, which is your execution point of that code. And then a bezel, which is, like I mentioned before, it's a dynamic, what they call a component. So that's a combination of HTML and JavaScript that when you view the screen, when you go to a panel, and there's each of the different views, each view that's assigned a bezel, it recognizes that, yeah, this viewpoint in this view, I want to compile all the code that goes behind a bezel and insert it inside of that view. So that allows us to do all of this crazy stuff like, you know, a PDF viewer and, you know, all of this different technology we're doing is because we have the ability to dynamically insert content into a view. And I'll explain that a little bit more later. And I think after that, I get more into the back end. So I'm actually going to pop into Portal here and explain a couple different things. So one is that your home is just a panel. Like any other panel, it only has one special property to it, that you can pin other items to home. So if I go down here and I've got my budget by state, I can click the pin to home button here and add a pin to it. And what that does is it creates another view for that bezel, puts that view in the home panel, and then associates this bezel to that view. So that probably sounds really confusing, but the first thing I'm going to start here. So if I come down here and I say create view, and I just call it test. So this is a view. This particular view has no code behind it. It's just a blank window at this point in time, and I can still, you know, resize and drag and drop and do all that kind of fun stuff to it. But there's no actual code behind it yet. So that's a view. When I click Select Bezel, this is showing me a list of my bezels that are available. So again, the bezel is the code and the front end that make up the actual component itself. And so I've got my bezels, which are the ones that I created or that I've imported, and then I've got shared bezels. So the difference between the two, my bezels, I can read and write them. I can update them, I can change them, I can view the code, I can do all those different things. A shared bezel is my administrator or an outside person or something like that sends me a share that says, I want to share this data with you. When you accept it, you can't modify that bezel. You can't even view the code of the bezel. It just allows an administrator to say, I want to share this bezel with all these people. What it actually does behind the scenes is it gives them read access to that bezel. Now, an important note is Bezlio does not sync or does not store any data in the cloud ever or on a bezel. There's no data storage on a bezel. The bezel is only the interface. The actual data is coming from your network. So even if I came into here and I said, I'm going to share this bezel with somebody, the administrator has to approve that user to be able to get access to that data for the share to actually work. So that's an important piece of it. You can share, but IT still has last control to say who's actually allowed to access the data. They could run it, but it would say, you don't have rights to do that, so I'm not going to share you this data. Okay, right here. So that kind of gets into the bezels, the panels, the views that are on top of here. Now, I mentioned the data side of things, and that's going to get into the back-end technology. And this one has a graphic as well. But you'll hear us refer a lot to BRDB or Bezlio Remote Data Broker. And that is really a core crux to how this whole technology works. And I think Adam talks about this later on as well, but again, we're going to keep talking about it a lot of ways, is that how Bezlio is different from current solutions that are out there. Normally, if you're using the cloud solution, you sync your data to the cloud, and the users are accessing that synced data that's somewhere in the cloud. That data is stale, that data is old, that data is read-only. You can't really do anything with it. The other option is that companies were hosting their own applications, web applications, which meant they had to install it in their network, they had to modify the firewall, open up port 80 or port 403 or whatever, and host so that their users are going directly to the network because that server can then communicate to the database server. The problem with that is that, most users shouldn't be hosting web servers. There is such vulnerability around web servers right now that are constantly being attacked, that are constantly being gone after. That if you miss a couple patches or something like that, you can leave yourself very vulnerable in that condition. There are script kiddies out there that are just looking across the entire addressable web, kind of web sphere, trying to find outdated versions of web servers. And if they can find it and they can penetrate it, they can get access to that system. Well, that system is, it should have been what they call DMZ'd or demilitarized, so that it can't access the rest of your network. But in practice, nobody's doing that. So what happens? They access that, and then they can access your ERP system through the web server. And then once they get that, they've got the keys to whatever they want. So in general, we didn't want out, reads it, and like, yep, I know who this is. Yep, they're allowed to have this. They're allowed to fulfill this request, and then puts the response data back, and then the user gets it. So it's a bi-directional communication, but the difference is that it's a pull, and the user is pushing, making a request for data. The server's only pulling. What that means is that you don't have to modify your firewall. You don't have to host like a web server or anything like that. BRDB is a technology that is sitting as the intermediary that's handling this cross-communication where we're blurring the line between on-prem data and cloud data. Now, BRDB can also accumulate data from multiple sources. So it also can do cloud data. I think I heard originally somebody mentioning how they wanted to look at like Magento and stuff like that as well. We can pull, cloud data, we can pull Salesforce data, we can pull ERP data, we can pull all of this data using one technology platform. And using encryption and using a lot of compression, we're able to do it fast and we're able to do it very securely, much, much more securely than if you're hosting your own portal. So that's the custom transport layer. And then your plugins, and Adam kind of mentioned this earlier, it's a folder that has DLL files into it. And why this is really, and they're kind of built in a certain way, why this is important is that we don't hold the keys to developing new plugins. In fact, Bob tomorrow is going to be doing a presentation about building your own plugins. So if there's a system that we don't work with, that we've not built a plugin for already, there's a Visual Studio extension that you can add that'll give you a new template to create a blank plugin template. You fill out, you write the code that you want in there, you drop that DLL into your plugins folder, and all of a sudden, all of your users can access that plugin. So that's where I'm trying to talk about the fact that you can take this thing, which is X. We've got plugins for Visual and Epicor and SQL Server and all these kind of things. But you could turn it into something completely different. You could have your own plugin. You could have a Kaufman plugin that's doing just Kaufman-specific stuff to ease that whole process. So we've opened up the entire framework, the entire foundation, so that you can develop your own plugins and you can put them out there. A plugin, like I said, is a DLL called SQL Server in the plugins folder, and it's passing in, all the information it needs to be able to do that, and it's running a method called execute query. So you can build your own methods, and you'll see if anybody's been on the GitHub for the plugin, we do that a lot. For Epicor and for Visual as well, we write a lot of like helper methods just to make it a little bit easier to do. So like whenever you're creating a new sales order, normally in the Epicor process is you say, I'm going to get new, I'm going to get a data set back, I'm going to set the customer ID on it, and then once I do that, there's another method which fills in all the rest of the elements based on that customer ID changing. So we wrote a helper method to say, nope, I want to say one method, I want to say get new for this customer ID and have it pass me back a full data set automatically. So things like that where we can write helper methods in there to make these processes easier. And again, in the plugins, we have this fully documented, but you can do most business transactions with one line of code in Bezlio. So, you know, in the visual one, it's one line of code to create a customer order. In Epicor, I think it's two lines of code because there's one to get the data source back, and then there's the other when you're actually passing the output back into it. But things like this where, you know, the plugins make it a lot easier, but the plugins is an open architecture that we expect our users to be able to use. And because it's on GitHub, if you're doing things that's really cool, what we would love is for our users to also be submitting and contributing and doing all these kind of things as well. So, you know, we're putting these helper methods out there. But do you have helper methods you think are cool? You know, as long as it matches kind of what our standards are, we're trying to pull everybody together into one, you know, into one kind of team in terms of building this whole thing out. So this is the overall layout, and you've probably seen this because I stole it right from our other presentation. But you know, this is kind of the bits and piece of how this works. So the Bezlio Cloud is the interface, it's the bezels, it's the views, it's the panels. And if anybody's confused on the panel, view, bezel kind of triad there, we'll go back over it and try to clear up any questions you have there. But that's what the cloud is. That's how your users are interacting with the site. And they're interacting on laptops, tablets, smartphones, computers, anything like that. And there's no difference between you being internal and you being external. As I'll show you here in a second with some of the new technology that we're working with, and that's the thing that Adam was talking about that takes it from 2 seconds to 200 milliseconds. That operates like a real-time application, but it operates no matter where you're at with the same speed. So, for instance, we're building shop floor solutions out of Bezlio, and do they need to be cloud-hosted? No. Is there any cost to them being cloud-hosted? No. So why not use a framework that allows you to write your application one time and use it anywhere? So if you do have mobile people, or if you do need to do like mobile time tracking or inventory transfers or anything like that, you don't have to figure out how your users are even getting in to begin with. So that goes to the user's firewall. So the cloud is kind of where it's accumulating everything. The user's firewall, and then VRDB sits behind that, listening for those requests. They get those requests, and then as a part of the request, it says, I'm calling this plugin, I'm calling this method. So it validates who the user is, make sure that they have the right rights to it. I'm going to talk about security because in building this, a lot of our customers are defense industry or, you know, various other like medical and stuff like that. They have a lot of requirements around it. So security was paramount to the entire structure, the entire basis of how we built this thing. And we'll kind of talk more about those security measures so that you know your data is safe no matter what, in addition to being very timely. BRDB uses Bezlio data integrations. Those are plugins. So it gets that, runs that code, passes the data into it, and that's communicating with the data center and databases. Now, we almost need an extra little bit over here, like a little cloud that's also, you know, sort of kind of like over here, sort of. Because one of the things that we're doing is like with Salesforce, you're communicating to BRDB, but you're communicating to the cloud. So it's going to BRDB, which is validating the user, handling credentials, doing all that kind of stuff. And then maybe it's going to salesforce.com and pulling data. Or from any other kind of cloud-hosted application. And we have a native integration for SharePoint, which does not use BRDB. But in general, that allows us to take and use the same communication framework no matter where your application is stored at. It's part of our goal is to say, let's get rid of this idea of on-prem and off-prem data and say, you've got data, you've got business data, and we can consolidate how you access and how you interact with that data in a single point. So terminology revisited. I'm going to add a couple more bits of terminology in here, just so you kind of know where we're at. So we've got apps. An app is like you'd be used to on your phone, for the most part, is a full-featured application that's available through Bezlio, that's stored in our apps repository out there. So these are things like account view. We've got an order entry app. We've got our route planner. We've got things like that where it has all of the functionality already done. All you have to do is put a couple queries in your network and set up in BRDB in the admin side, which you'll learn about tomorrow, set up the connections for it, and out of the box it'll work. That's what apps are, and that's kind of an ever-expanding, ever-growing list of things. A template is different from an app in that it's going to ask you about your data. It's going to start off, and in a template, you're going to say, all right, this is this is the data connection that I want to use. This is the type of data I want to pull. It's going to bring that data back, and it's going to say, all right, well, what fields and values do you want to use this? So a template is a wizard to build like analytics and tables and stuff like that, but it's different from an app, which is completely standalone. A template is more interactive to build out. Importing versus sharing, I'll step ahead on that one. I already kind of mentioned, if somebody sends you an export of a bezel and you import it, that's your copy of the bezel. That's your own copy then, and it's always going to be separate from the other one. If you share it, it allows an administrator to say, I'm going to have the master copy of this bezel, and I want all these other users to be able to execute it, but not modify it, not change it, not delete it. And also if you share it, this is kind of a cool thing, is if I update the master that I've shared, all of the users immediately have that update reflected. So it makes administration a lot easier. You don't have to worry about this one's out of date and this one's out of date and this one's out of date. You can share it. It's very easy to do. And once it's shared, then they all stay in sync with each other automatically. Custom designer, and again, I'm going to kind of step into the site after I talk about all of these to kind of show them. The custom designer is that is the first thing that we build for building out the site. So for people who've been into it, that's the one where you have the HTML markup. That's the one where you add functions and variables and do all that kind of stuff. We tried to make it drag and drop. We tried to make it very easy to use. But the cool thing about it is that everything that we've built, we built in Custom Designer first. So when you guys get into here, you're looking at these apps and you're looking at these templates, we actually filled it in Custom Designer, and then we turn it into something else. We turn it into an app or whatever. So that means that anything that you've seen us do, you guys are all capable of doing, especially after these 2 days, of being able to build things that are that incredible. You know, the whole thing is built off of HTML5 and a language called TypeScript, which is a superset of JavaScript, which is a version of ES6, which I'll talk about all in a second, and that'll sort of make sense because as we go through it. But so with that custom designer, like in HTML5, drag and drop. You know, we're doing things like signature capture, different things like that. We're really being able to utilize the latest and the greatest in web technology, and again, making that available to everybody versus, you know, like a SharePoint site or something like that, which gives you like this much functionality. You know, it expands its way out there. Data connections. Maybe an important bit to note is that each connection connects you to one instance of BRDB. And that instance of BRDB can communicate to anything that it can see, cloud hosted or on-prem. But you can have multiple data connections that users are able to use at once. So if you've got multiple sites, multiple facilities, not connected through WAN or anything like that, you can actually have multiple data connections for each of those different places. And when the request goes out, the user says, hey, I need information from database A and then information from database C. Database C is stored in a separate network from somewhere completely different. It can actually execute both of those queries at the same time and pull that information back all at once. So it can you know, help you kind of consolidate your data even if you don't have the same physical location inside of there. And then sharing. And I'm going to kind of hop into here and show a couple bits and pieces of that. All right, so I'm logged in as myself here, and if I go on to, I'm just going to come into here. I'm going to delete that view. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new view on here, and we're going to call it Viewer, create View, and I'm going to set up an app so you can kind of see what's going on here. If I hit Select Bezel, then I go to Create Bezel. The first thing we have are our apps. So we've got a Crystal Viewer, Production Team Leader, all the sales rep apps, etc. The process for installing an app is I hit Select, and it's done. No questions or anything like that because the administrator's already set up what reports I'm allowed to access on the server side of things. So all I need to do is just select that app, and I've got a fully functioning application inside of Bezlio. So if I come into here, I can click on, labor report, and it's actually, this is a Crystal report that it's executing in our Wadsworth office that it then packages up and sends to me directly based off of reports that I'm allowed to see inside of here. It's also smart enough that if I use like orders by state, which has parameters, it reads the parameters, and I can put them in and pass them into it. And again, this was built in a custom designer, and then we ended up rolling it into an app. SSRS is going to work pretty much exactly the same way as this one does. But these are apps. They're already fully formed, fully forged out there. Versus a template, if I go into budget by state here, I already created it, so we'll just use this one. And I'm going to go to Create Bezel. I'm going to use my templates. So these are ones that are going to ask me how my data is formed and all that kind of stuff. We've got grids and area charts and bar charts and calendar, all sorts of different stuff like that. I'll just go down here and I'll just pick a 3D pie chart. And I'm going to create budget by state. I'm going to pick Bezlio Remote Data Broker, so we already talked about what that is. My connection, Sabre Logic. My resource, and this is going to be something that Adam's going to be talking about. It's easier to take you through these templates and how to use them kind of on the advanced side. These are all of our plugins. Like I mentioned, the Accord framework, that's actually a brand new one that was just added. Crystal, DCS, all of these kind of things. Your users probably won't see these. These are instances that we've created already where we've already filled out all that information, and then we share that report instance with the user, that data instance with the user, so they don't have to know what to do. I'll pick budget by state, which is an instance I have. I'm going to execute it, hit next, and it's going to execute that query, pull the results back, and says, all right, I found this data, what do you want to do? The label is going to be state, the value will be budget, hit next, ask me an unreasonable amount of options that we can add onto there, hit save. And I can select this one now. And it's charted out. It's charted out our data on here. Oh, apparently I updated that to 16 million. We'll change that. Save that. Refresh. No, that looks better. 1.6 million versus 16. Otherwise, that was way too small. So that's a template. A template is a wizard-driven interface that kind of pulls you through the process of being able to analyze your own data. The advanced grid and stuff like that as we come out are going to be even better in terms of being able to take these and really interact with your data, drag and drop and all that kind of stuff. Again, we're really trying to on the other side, it understands how it's creating these fusion charts. If I try to edit it, it's going to use the template editor when it comes into it. But it's that so choose file. There's my budget group by state. So you see that it imported a copy of it. But it's that easy to be able to export, if you use Vision Control or anything like that, to be able to export them and be able to import them back in. Again, it's very easy. Now, again, just because I imported it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to run, because the administrator still has to say, you've got access to run budget by state. You've got access to run. Inside of here, you have the ability to create variables, data subscriptions, functions. I'm going to move that over. And this entire thing is, again, built off of drag and drop. So if I come in here and I say that I want a calendar, I can just drag it in here and preview it, and it builds the calendar out for me. So the entire thing is built on drag and drop. It's advanced. If you're a programmer, the things that we've done in our apps and our templates and everything else, completely possible inside here, but this is definitely one that you kind of have to have the understanding of a little bit more depth in terms of programming. Apps are the easiest, templates are the second easiest, and then custom designer is pretty much off the wall in terms of what you want to build out. And I talked, the data connections, the last thing I want to talk about. I'm going to go fast. Let's go here. If you click on maintain data, you guys have probably seen this already, but it shows your connection name, the connection ID and token, the status if it's connected or not. And whenever we connect to a server, whenever like a server comes online, the first thing it does is it tells me what plugins do I have loaded. So this server has Accord, Crystal, DCS, Epicor 10, Epicor 905, Excel. This is one of our programmer ones. You guys should all have logins. I don't know. Either somehow provided to you. Okay. So we're actually, for your sessions, you'll be using those logins that we already had set up for you. And we had some Excel files already loaded. So as we go through with like kind of building these things out, you guys can just log in and use those, and then we'll disable them after the conference. So you guys don't have a bunch of free users. All right. So I'm going to go on to the next part here. Terminology. And I'll get into some fun stuff in this one. So Angular 2, as Adam kind of mentioned, Google came up with the technology a long time ago called Angular. And what that did is it allowed users to be able to take and say, here's data, I have a data model, and here's my user interface, and using a feature called interpolation, which you won't have to remember, but it's basically using some squirrely braces in there, that you can say, all right, I just want to put data placeholders, kind of like a mail merge as you go through here, and whenever the data changes, I want the user interface to be automatically updated and reflect that data as it changes in real time. That's why Angular changed the world. Now, after Angular 1, they had this idea, and the minds at Google, and they said, we made some mistakes when we made Angular 1. It became too costly in some ways in terms of CPU cycles, and people were doing some really crazy stuff with it. And there's this foundation to JavaScript And you'll hear a lot of people complain about JavaScript because of this, is that it's this idea that they call fully mutable. So if I take a string and I say, hello, this string is equal to hello world, and then right afterward I can say, actually this string is a function, and when you call this function, it's going to do this. So because of that, it's very difficult for the system to be able to figure out that I changed a string into a function, and what do I do with that if I'm trying to interpolate this function into the DOM. I'm going to keep using the term DOM. I think it's good to understand what the DOM is. It's like document object model, is that right? Something like that. But basically what that means is that Angular created this idea that you've got your working DOM, the one that you're actually communicating with, and then it has another one behind the scenes that's tracking these updates, it's making these changes, and when that gets updated, it merges those changes into your working DOM. So that's what the shadow DOM is. It's kind of behind the scenes bit that's working there. But as they changed this, so Angular 1, they got into this, where they're really struggling with the technology. So they said, we're going to build Angular 2. And they probably didn't apologize enough to the developers because there was a massive revolt from Angular. And then you started seeing people moving to different frameworks and technologies and stuff like that because they spent all this time building on Angular, and they said, well, there's no straight path forward from Angular 1 to Angular 2. They're not doing that anymore. Just to kind of show you how confusing this whole thing got, Angular 2 is going to be it's going to continue to evolve, and they have an evolution path forward with it because they solved the problems that they're trying to solve. Part of that being the mobile bit that I talked earlier about, is being able to take these webpack and turn it into mobile applications easier. But now that they've kind of gotten there, the next release of Angular is going to be Angular 4. And everybody's going to look at that and say, like, all right, well, what happened to 3? Well, as they were going through at Angular 2, they created, all these different modules. One of these modules was the Angular router, and the Angular router team built it one way, decided they didn't like how that was working, and created version 3 of the router. Meanwhile, all of the other packages are on version 2. So now there's like everything's 2 except for router, which is 3. And now they're like, all right, well, with 4, we're going to fix all of this back up, and everybody's going to be on the same page again. They actually have a regular release schedule. It's part of the thing that we're working with this basically right as it exited alpha. And that meant a lot of refactoring our code. And I remember one release in particular. So I mentioned earlier this idea of dynamic components and how it compiles them and inserts them into the DOM. And now we sort of understand what a DOM is. They changed that, and they're going through, and then that was a core foundation of how Bezlio works, is this dynamic component loader. And then they deprecated that, and they're like, oh, we're going to do it a different way now. That's like, I saw the patch notes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, were we just using a bug in Angular, and it just happened to work, and it's going to be a real problem for us? The answer is no. We did have to refactor and rework our code. I think it's better now than it was before, but those are the kind of things that we went through. But Angular has been really core for the portal side of things. A lot of what you're interacting with portal is actually an Angular 2 application. The rest of it is proprietary to us. You'll probably notice that, you may notice if you're a programmer, is that we're not working with what they call like pure JavaScript. We're actually working with what they call a superset of JavaScript called TypeScript. And Angular went to this as a preferred language because of the problem I mentioned before about mutability and immutability, is to say that in TypeScript I can say this variable is a string, and if I try to use it as something other than a string, it's going to squawk at me and say, hey, this is a string, you can't execute a string. Like, what are you trying to pull here? So we use TypeScript as well, which adds a lot of cool functions and features to it. We also shimming in a new technology called ES6. So JavaScript right now, since about 2009, is on ES5. and ES6 is the next version of it. We shim all of those features directly into the browser automatically, but that lets you do a lot of cool stuff. You'll see, with our drag and drop, a lot of it's like traditional for statements and stuff like that. But using ES6, I can say this array dot for each and use Lambda functions inside of there to say for every iteration of this, I want you to perform this task. So you can combine these together. So I can say this array dot filter and apply a filter to it dot for each, and then just cycle through the array post-filter. It's very fast. It's very powerful in terms of what you can do with that. ES6 adds a lot of really cool functionality into it. And we'll probably be talking more about that as we go through here. The new thing that we're doing is something called WebSockets. So right now, when we built Bezlio out, we built it with what was pretty common technology at the time. It's called RESTful. So REST is like big capital R-E-S-T, and it allows you to do like get and push and all these like traditional web things, only working with an API on it. Before that, there was an API called SOAP, which was a lot more of a pain to work with. REST simplified that. And so we were doing all of our calls as they call RESTful. So it makes a request, puts it out there, gets a response, closes the connection. Next one comes in, sends a request, gets a response, closes the connection. The new version that we're coming out with, and why Adam was talking about we would need to make sure that everything's working right, is we're switching to a concept of WebSockets. And what that is it's a persistent connection between the client and the server, which allows for very, very, very fast data access, taking it from 2 seconds down to 200 milliseconds. And on top of that, it'll actually get us to a point later on where we can have the server initiate a push of data directly to the client. Now, this is something that's not built in, but it's something we're going to be capable of doing. So we're trying to get a lot of our people to get to exception management. So instead of looking through a report or anything like that, is just looking at the exceptions that are actionable and working off of those exceptions. So as we kind of grow this thing out, WebSockets is going to be really cool because it can say, hey, when this database trigger fires, I want you to tell this user that they need to approve this purchase order. You can do cool stuff like that with it. It also allows us to be even more disconnected. So basically what happens is when you first go to the page, it's just throwing requests out there like crazy. It says, I'm going to put all my requests out at once, and then as the server gets time, it's responding back, and the DOM is automatically updating on that data that comes back through. And I'll actually show you a sample of that when we log into Dev, and hopefully we'll be able to see a little bit of a difference here. An interesting thing that's happened, and for anybody that's been a programmer for any period of time, is that Microsoft's changed a lot in probably about 3 years, maybe less than that. Microsoft of old was Visual Studio, which is still a good product. But there's like this C# and VB.NET and all these different technologies. Many of you might remember Silverlight. They decided they were going to come up with their own language, and it was going to be the new web language, and then it died pretty quick. Microsoft got to a point where they realized they were losing. They weren't losing the operating system, but they were losing programmers. And for anybody that remembers Steve Ballmer, he was very big into programmers. But it's one of those things where they saw that they were losing the fight to the next generation. So actually on GitHub, Microsoft is one of the biggest contributors to open source technology right now. And we're using a lot of it. So SignalR, which is our WebSocket, so I'll show you here in a little bit, Microsoft technology. WebSockets is a standard. SignalR is an implementation of that standard. TypeScript, that was also largely supported and funded by Microsoft. Most of our code editing now, we switched from using Visual Studio and we use Microsoft Code instead, which is an open source application, a code editor. NativeScript, which allows you to write like web applications once and then compile it natively for multiple devices for Android and iOS and anything like that. And that's a Microsoft collaboration with Jazz Express, I believe. So again, just big names getting together in the market. Another technology we have called ReactiveX that we use a lot, which I particularly like because it's a fun play on words with ActiveX for programmer humor. But so they took Active, like, it really has nothing to do with ActiveX, but other than the name. But it allows you to do things like that's pretty cool in programming technology to say, like, if I have an instance of a variable, when it changes, I want this code to execute. So you can say, like, whenever, it's like whenever I set this variable, I want this custom code to run then. That's a technology called ReactiveX that we use extensively in the framework of Bezlio as well. So with that, and I'm hoping that everything's going to work right because it is dev, which gets built every night. But I've got 2 panels up here. You guys have already seen me logging into this one. So I'm going to click on our CRM tab here. This has most of our CRM applications, and it's probably one of the biggest in terms of data usage. Get out of here. Oh, of course there was on this. Let's see. Get out of here. All right, we're going to go back and forth the panel so you can kind of get a feel for this data speed. So just kind of be paying attention to when the data pops, as you kind of see these things on here. This is the performance of the website. Like, if I would say so myself, I think it's pretty impressive, especially what it's doing, considering it's, we're at Kaufman, and it's communicating to Wadsworth, and it's, checking my credentials and security and encrypting everything and doing all that kind of stuff, but that's what we're experiencing right now. This is dev. So if I click on CRM, the first time it sometimes takes a little bit longer to load. So you can see, get out of here. You can see the speed difference, hopefully. Like if I click back on budget by state, it's already loaded. If I click back on CRM, like, now this one's loading, like Adam mentioned before, a whole bunch of data. But this is kind of the new future of where we're heading to this. If I use our trip planner, you can see how fast this data is coming in. This exceptionally fast data access. So like I said, or like Adam had mentioned before, we're looking at a 10x speed improvement over the current site. And it's also changing the way that we interact with data. So as I mentioned before, a lot of times we were preloading data because each individual request had overhead. Because like we talked about before, with it being REST, makes the request, waits for the response, gets the response back, that's each individual connection. Now with WebSocket, that connection is persistent, that connection is always open, so we can just put the request out and get responses back exceptionally faster. So we can do more, ad hoc. We can do more as-needed data pulls and stuff like that. This version is in dev, requires no server updates, no changes, nothing like that. One day, and I mentioned it before to some other people, but follow our social media. Either, get into Slack, talk to Kaylee, who's like our social media coordinator and stuff like that, is follow that because we're constantly putting updates out. We're constantly putting changes out. We put our change log out each week so that you can kind of see new features. Like, so there's a new Excel plugin that's way easier to work with Excel and work with XLSX files and all of that kind of stuff. We started integrating that machine learning library called Accord.net. I'm doing a whole series of blog posts about using machine learning and using statistics to be able to analyze manufacturing data and kind of taking some of the fogginess and some of the complexities out of doing that. Once this change goes live, like because it's going to be, we're just going to flip the switch once it's passed all its QA testing and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, you and your users are going to come in, and the site's going to be 10 times faster. But that's where we put everything out there. Each week, we're doing posts, we're doing blog posts, we're doing videos, we're doing all this kind of stuff. So absolutely, get on being able to follow that and keep being able to see what's kind of coming, what's going on, and what's coming next. And if you're on, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but if you're on our Slack, you're communicating directly with our team. So myself, and Adam, and Tanya, and Nick, and Kaylee, and Hillary, like everybody is on our company in our Slack. So there's all the time people are putting questions up. And, hey, I'm trying to do this, and we'll just respond back like, all right, this is all you have to do. or gifts of new things. Again, and we had an interesting discussion about this at a trade show. So, if you remember, like, unfortunately, it was the whole San Bernardino and stuff like that, but the FBI couldn't crack the encryption on your iPhone. If you want to know why, because AES-256 encryption, if you took 50 supercomputers and each of them were capable of checking a billion key space codes per second, it would take 3 times 10 to the 51st power. So that's 51 zeros. Years to exhaust the entire key space with the technology we have right now. Now, encryption technology was changing with volume, all that kind of stuff, but AES-256 encryption is incredibly secure in terms of what it does. And our implementation is in my opinion, is particularly cool about it because so each packet, I send a request out there, I want customer data. When it comes back, each one is encrypted. Both the send and the receive is fully encrypted using AES-256. On top of that, we're kind of using like an SSL tunnel almost. So the encrypted packets are going through SSL. So for somebody to get something, they'd have to break the SSL tunnel, the encryption, get a packet, and then somehow find a way to decrypt it with this AES-256. And usually what happens with things like that, when people really have a problem with security, is because users have like the password of like guess, like maybe watching Archer, like an ongoing joke that people have like weak passwords and everybody set their password to guess. So even if they got that, but in ours, we actually use a randomly assigned encryptor that's known by the user and known by the server, but it's fully, it's like up to full like password length requirements, mixed case, mixed alphanumeric and all that kind of stuff, like 14 characters long, like that your users can never manage. So it's an exceptionally secure tunnel, both in terms of having SSL and then AES-256 encryption underneath it, and none of that data is ever stored anywhere. So it's only, in transit to you, and then if it's not picked up right away, it gets immediately purged out of the system and there's no trace of it. So security to us was a very, very big thing because it's part of the problem we're solving, or part of the problem we're trying to solve, is that we didn't want people hosting their own stuff and, having potential weak setups and stuff like that that would allow users to get access to data they should not have access to. A very, very important aspect to Bezlio, and what I think is the success of Bezlio going forward, is community. Coming from an ERP consulting background, and in particular, since we never sold software, we partnered up with VARs, and we partnered up with all these other companies and stuff like that. And what we found was that we would have small communities of our customers kind of get together, work together on tasks and projects and stuff like that, and including the VARs and stuff like that. So I'm a big believer in community. It's like a rising tide raises all ships, or whatever that phrase is. But it's the same kind of concept. Is that if we're not in direct competition with each other, we can share. And through the technology, we can use this kind of stuff better. So that's why we put a lot of our stuff on GitHub. Our plugins and our apps are on GitHub, because we want users to be able to collaborate and be able to communicate and be able to work on this platform and build community around this platform. It's something that I really strongly believe in, is that it provides a really cool framework for sharing this kind of things in a lot easier ways. In addition to that, that's also part of why we have Slack, is because our users communicate on Slack and our developers communicate on Slack. And, it just provides a great platform for being able to take all these different things and and be able to communicate around it and have direct messages and give us a chance to respond and stuff like that. To us, that's exciting. We're coming from, as a consulting company, where we had to track all of our hours and all of our minutes and all that kind of stuff on projects and make sure they're getting billed and stuff like that. And part of what we want to be able to do is not keep this separation between the developers and the users, even as we grow and as we grow up and as we grow out, is be able to have that collaboration and have that involvement. Because a lot of times, a user will post out on Slack and be like, hey, I'm trying to do this, and this. And maybe they've thought of a way of doing it, but our developer's like, well, have you thought about doing this? We're going to talk later about this, in Anu's presentation, about using a technology called Require.js in particular, that allows you to take any JavaScript library, pretty much, that's out in the world, which there's a lot of them, and use them inside of Bezlio. A customer may be thinking, I have to do this all myself, I have to build all this technology. A lot of times there's a library that's getting 80% of the way there, and all you have to do is just kind of frame it in with a UI and make sense of it. So I think it's really important. An area that we're really excited about, so SaberLogic again, we grew through partnerships. Until Kaylee and Hillary did not really have a sales presence other than just being reactive. Because we've partnered with companies like Bizstack and stuff like that, people who have, worked with us, understood the technology, understood our capabilities and what we're doing, and would leverage that in terms of inside of their customer base. So one of our goals is to be able to grow a partner network around Bezlio, especially in different areas that we don't really have coverage. We're talking to companies that support like Exapta and stuff like that. So companies are going to be able to kind of carve out their own niche and their own specialty inside of Bezlio, servicing markets that are important and are close to them. We provide the framework, they can provide the rest of the service around it of how to integrate it in there. And another thing that we're working on a concept for, and I don't know when or if this is already available, but it's something we're trying to do, and we're actually doing it right now, just kind of ad hoc as we go through here. But this idea of bounties. So let's say that, and this is the circumstance right now, 3 customers on the same ERP platform are requesting some of the same modules, inventory transfer and a couple other things like that. We only have to build it once, because once we build it one time, it's going to go into our app store, and then all of our users get access to it once it's in the app store. So we're allowing these customers to say, all right, the 3 of you want this, you guys can split the bill. You can split the difference on it. All we care about is it's going to take us X hours to be able to produce Y product. We don't care how it gets funded. What we'd like to do eventually is take that to almost like a Kickstarter kind of idea, where users could put out a request for an app type or something like that, or we could develop ideas of apps that we think are cool, put them out there, and allow companies to come in and say, yeah, I think I'd like to help fund the development on doing something like that. With an end goal being that we'll be able to take developers who want to, perform some additional work as well, and allow them to also take the bounty. So, if they're a good developer, they can look at it and say, yep, I can build that out for you, and they could actually take the bounty instead of us having to do it, or, partners or anything like that. We're really trying to build a community and a framework that will allow us to grow this into something that's really exciting and really fun. So, where are we going? Mainspring growing. As Adam kind of mentioned before, it took us about a year to build. That was a long time of looking at a lot of technology and really working on the idea of it. 6 months into the release cycle, and we've been growing very, very aggressively. We have thankfully been able to leverage a company called Jumpstart out of Cleveland, and they're a company that helps other companies, especially tech companies, scale up and scale out. So they're helping us in terms of structure and marketing and all these kind of things that we never really had to worry about as much. But they've helped us also kind of establish very aggressive goals that we're achieving now. So user count, the growth, all these kind of things as we're building this community around it. How successful and how interactive is the community? How engaged is our user base? Things like that. Growing list of apps. So, again, we're constantly adding these apps. All of the apps that are available in GitHub aren't even in the app selector yet. We're constantly adding those and then going back through and hooking them back up. Growing list of templates, so that I mentioned with Fusion charts and Advanced Grid Designer and all these kind of things. We're going to be constantly adding to this framework. If you look at it, for anybody who's been involved for a period of time with it, in 6 months, we took it from you can build a bar graph and a pie chart, and you can write custom code and build these apps into what it is now, which is an interactive site that's wizard-driven and all this kind of stuff. We're going to continue to refine that. We're going to work on user kind of usability and ease of use and ease of setup and ease of administration, but also taking this advanced concepts and these advanced, powerful software and bringing it into the platform. And that's the cool thing about it, is we'll see during the presentation tomorrow that Bob's going to do. You can write a plugin in about a day. I think Adam's Excel plugin took 2 or 3 days total to finish up. The Accord framework plugin that I did took probably about 2 or 3 days to set up. But you can build these plugins in about a day. So you can kind of see how aggressively, now that the core is done, how aggressively we can continue to expand on this and add new functionality and apps and templates and new capabilities and systems like that. So new technology, the Bezlio vision. As you can kind of tell, I'm a big proponent of Bezlio. I'm excited about it. I think that I can speak very, very certainly. This is the most exciting thing that I've ever worked on. Now, granted, it's Saber Logic. For a long time we were doing custom consulting. There was a lot of projects that I had a lot of fun doing and being involved with, like a company that was processing audio records, audio files from Apple to try to find out how much each user gets charged per play and all this kind of stuff, which was an interesting big data problem before big data problems were even really a thing. So I had a chance to work on a lot of really cool projects like that, but nothing like this, like what I've been doing with Bezlio in terms of being able to build something I feel like has a real impact, in terms of the technology landscape as far as I'm concerned. I know that's bold and it's a big, probably brash statement to say, but it's I really think that this changes things because it changes the idea of on-prem data and off-prem data and when you need cloud data and when you don't need cloud data, because right now it's like this either cloud or not. But now we can say that it can be both, which I think is big and important and changes. And then also, we're partnering. We partner with our customers. You guys in here I'm absolutely flattered and so excited for everybody to be in the room. I think that, this to us, we're originally kind of kicking it off as almost like a funny idea. We launched this product this year and we're like, we're going to have a developers conference, and then we started asking people about it and it's mainly, people asking us hey, we need some training. So it started going, we're like, okay, and then we started seeing more people sign up and more people sign up. And, next year we're not going to be able to fit in here. So this is definitely something we plan on doing every year as a part of it. But, we partner with our customers. We want to know what you guys are experiencing. We want to know the good, we want to know the bad, we want to know the ugly. And we want to talk to you guys about where we're heading and the things that we're doing. Because you may look at it, it's well, yeah, that's a good idea, but this is where we're struggling, or have you thought about this, or you've been looking at that. And that's important to us, is to get that feedback. Our resellers, so like I mentioned with companies that are reselling Bezlio, they're bringing their own take to it. They're bringing their own expertise. They might be bringing their own Bezls. They're going to be bringing their own aspects to make them resellers as a value-added service to Bezlio as well. And us, that's exceptionally exciting. And we've got a great group of people that are sharing the message for us now, that are getting the message out in user groups and stuff like that. That is just incredibly valuable because we're taking a brand new technology. We're trying to explain to people, and a lot of times in a very short period of time, why this is important and why I'm so excited about it. But also then on the other side is investors. So as I kind of mentioned, as we transition into Saber Logic being more of a software company, one of the things that we're looking at is saying, all right, well, how do we scale this up and scale this out? How do we take this and make this something that's national, that's international? We fully see the use case of this in a global brand, but how do we get there? It's not something that we're necessarily the consulting company, we're not specialized in. So one of those things that we're doing is we're looking for these outside companies who have had experience in building something like this and partnering and teaming up with them. And we've got some really exciting companies that are getting involved that are going to really help us take this thing and make it something massive. So I hope that you guys all kind of appreciate also that this isn't going to be a flash in the pan. That we really are excited about this technology, and I think that as it continues to grow and continues to evolve, you guys are really coming in at a really interesting ground floor of the first year of something new.